Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alan Potcotter, and you're listening to CallTalk for July 31st, 2019. Today's topic is agent performance and quality training. If you're listening live, we invite you to be part of the show and ask questions. Here's how you do it. Email me at calltalk@benchmarkportal.com. I want to remind everyone that all of our shows are archived and available to listen to at any time of the day. You can be found at benchmarkportal.com. And now I'd like to introduce the host of the show, Bruce Belfiore.
Thank you, Alan, and welcome back to Call Talk, everyone. I have a few questions for our listeners. Does your contact center struggle with getting agents floor ready? Well, I can hear heads nodding throughout the land. Ever had a bad experience with your contact center agents? And why do you think that happened? You know, there's an awful lot that goes on here with regard to how to take care of these issues. And a lot of it can be, in fact, confronted through effective agent education. And that's why we wanted to talk more about agent performance quality and training. And we brought in a real expert on the topic for you, Nancy Munro. Welcome to the show, Nancy.
Well, thanks for having me, Bruce. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, great. Well, Nancy, for our listeners, is the CEO of Verbal Transactions. She has over 28 years in developing organizations and implementing and deploying voice enablement solutions. She's worked with organizations like CVS, AT&T, and Microsoft, helping them to decipher how best to address performance challenges that align to their structural capabilities and revenue goals. She helped pioneer voice-enabled technologies and was the first to launch an interactive audio role-playing simulator. Her current solutions leverage speech recognition and AI to provide immersive learning applications. Nancy is an industry speaker and was the chair of the MIT Enterprise Forum of Chicago for 3 years. So we really have a person with tons of experience and insights for our listeners. It's really great. And Nancy, on the subject, which is a huge subject after all, your focus is really on training and improving the customer experience. Can you tell us all more about this?
Sure. Thanks, Bruce. And so let me position it this way. There's a lot of focus right now on CX. You know, everything's X now, right? And so that customer experience, and there's a huge focus on that. And when I call up those executives that have that role in the organization and present to them, you know, what I do, and my focus within training, I said, well, I have nothing to do with training. And I said, well, there seems to be a disconnect here because absolutely the two are intertwined together. You know, the better trained your agents are, obviously the better customer experience your customers are going to have. And I always show this picture of a woman screaming into a phone. It's the customer on the other end of the phone. And I said, I can bet every single one of us can relate to that experience. Yep. And it's usually either somebody's just trying to stick to their script and they've not been given the ability to think for themselves. They've not been on the phone experience long enough. They weren't given enough time for practice sessions. And, you know, there's always a direct correlation between those organizations that invest more money in per head per training dollar. There's a correlation around profitability and success overall within the organization. But, you know, anytime, you know, there's a budget squeeze, one of the first things to get cut is training from that budget.
Yeah, and that really is a shame because the, you know, sort of overflow effect with regard to training is there are many of them. I was just, in fact, corresponding with a colleague about first contact resolution. And the fact that there's really so much that goes into that. And training is a huge part of it, along with technology. And sometimes training technology actually is a big part of it. And the spin-off effects of that are multiple because if you have more first call resolution through good training and through good training
Mm-hmm.
technology, you then have fewer calls because there's going to be fewer repeats
Sure.
done. It's also going to reduce the amount of handle time, and it's going to increase customer satisfaction, agent satisfaction, because actually they're going to be happier, right? Trained agents are happy agents, aren't they? Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Who wants to get yelled at every day you go to work, right? From customers that are
exactly.
upset.
Yeah, it's no fun. It's no fun.
No.
And actually, if you feel you're well supported through your training that's been given to you, that shows that your company cares about you and cares about the customers, right? Then it's all going to work better, and you're going to end up bringing the cost down too. And you're right. People oftentimes are sitting in silos and saying, okay, customer experience, we want good customer experience. What does that have to do with my training department? It has everything to do with your training department, right?
Yeah. Well, if you think of that, in the IT world, people use the term single point of failure. So for a contact center, obviously the single point of failure is people can't call in or use chat or whatever, but then that next single point of failure is the person they're interacting with. And you think of all the time and money investment that organization paid to acquire that customer, and within one phone call, not only could you lose them, but with social media these days, they're going to spread the word pretty darn fast on Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is, and just say, never ever use this company again because this happened to me.
Yeah. No, in fact, that is right. We're all sort of in the thrall of social media these days, and it can have such a big impact. Even when the impact may be limited, it oftentimes gets to the senior people in our organization. And for us, it can be a disaster, even if, objectively speaking, the company's not going to fold because of it. We could end up folding because of it. So it has to be taken very seriously, and obviously you want to sort of really make sure you've got the best customer experience possible.
Well, and you think today's tight job market too. Bringing those people in, the recruitment costs up front to even find those people, and you've got some contact centers that are in geographic challenging areas where they kind of suck through that population pretty fast. So, they want to be able to find ways to make sure that that person they recruited, spent all that time and money to get on board, is going to stay on board because their pool of, possible employees is getting smaller and smaller these days too.
Right. No, that's an important thing, and people will obviously jump ship if it's a lot more money or whatever. But one of the things that people in the industry do, agents do, is to talk to each other, and they can do that, either virtually over the internet, or they can do it in person.
Right.
And if you have a good reputation for providing top training, and that's reinforced through really good mentoring and coaching, then that can be important. So what does that look like when it's really done well? When it's done well and does support the customer experience?
Well, I think it all comes down to the culture first. Does the culture allow for that? And then there tends to be a big gap around the skill set of that floor manager. And so some do it better than others. And so some of the training could also go into training the actual managers on the floor, the leadership within the contact center, and you guys probably know that better than anybody because you guys provide some of that. So it's, there's so much focus on getting an agent training, product knowledge, up to speed, train, but who's training the people training them on how to actually provide them with good coaching and good feedback? Because that doesn't come natural to people. Typically, somebody got promoted because they were a good agent, and now they're the manager. And so somebody forgot to teach them how to be a manager, and they're just kind of stuck learning it on the fly and not always doing the best job.
No, that's absolutely true. We see that all the time, Nancy, where people are promoted either to training management positions or to supervisor positions, and they themselves aren't given the right training to be really good trainers and coaches. And all that is extremely important. The poor supervisors, who are the ones who I think are the heroes of the contact center, have so much put on them. I mean, they are the sandwich meat, aren't they, in the middle of everything.
Right.
And when they're good,
yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, and you think of the rate of pay at which those agents are getting paid, isn't, top scale, but yet they're expected to, do this within a certain amount of seconds, resolve this within a certain amount of time, say these words, open up this resource, know how to, it's crazy insane, and they're being watched. Every micro movement they're doing is being watched by somebody, which is so stressful that, you've got to have somebody that can empathize with them on their end of all the things that they're, all the responsibility that they're, being burdened with for the rate of pay that they're making, and sometimes there's a breaking point there.
Yeah, that's right. And the empathy part is really important. And unfortunately, you do see situations where people are promoted to supervisor and they feel like they have to flick a switch, and they're no longer in touch with their former selves as agents. And that's you need to obviously take your new role seriously. But I've often advocated, particularly with certain clients, what I call changing the supervisor role to the agent advocate role. And what if you were, in fact, to change the name of supervisors to agent advocate, and to say, your success is going to be based on the success of your people, and so you need to train them, mentor them, etc. for that. And we as a company are going to make sure that you have the training in person and the technology-enabled training, etc., that will allow you to do that. And we're going to make it specific for supervisors. We're going to give you supervisor training. We're going to give you coaching training, and make it so that you can succeed in making others succeed. Right.
And I see that not only in call centers, but I've done a lot of work with inside sales and sales enablement organizations, and the same gap is loud and clear there too, because I think Harvard did a study where they'll coach their top performers and their low performers, but they're not coaching those people that are just getting by. And if they were able to move the needle just 10% of that bigger population, how much more effective and how much more of an impact it would have on the organization. So the same is for contact centers, I'm sure, because you've got top performers that are always flying by, winning all the awards, winning all the prizes, getting all the pats on the back. And then you got the people that are just, can't, they're really struggling, so they're going to get a lot of remedial, coaching. But those people in the middle, what do you do with them? Because, it's hard to provide a scalable way of tracking all those other people in the middle with the resources that you have. So you've got to find some way of providing them with some kind of reinforcement and engagement as much as you can. Because, just like the Harvard reports showed, if you could just move the needle incrementally 10% and improve their performance by that much, just think of how more first call resolutions you would have and all the benefits you would receive from that.
Right. Yeah, no, that's huge. That's huge. And what has your experience been, too, with regard to AI, speech recognition AI, with regard to the learning process? Because what you're just talking about obviously is partly a matter of scale, because if you have a very small center that's almost like a little family, maybe one or two supervisor groups, that's it. It's a very different environment than if you have a very large center where keeping track of, the needs and the status and the performance and the training of all the people in there, it gets pretty difficult, gets pretty hairy. So being able to rely on technology to see where people are and what they need could be very helpful. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Right. Yeah, so I've been kind of on a little soapbox these days because the standard way of measuring electronic training today is or online training is something called SCORM. And all SCORM is required to do is measure when somebody took the class and if they passed the test at the required level. So you have no idea what happened in between, what their true competency was, if they're actually transferring that knowledge and applying it to, achievable skills within the job. So where I see AI that can come into play is not replacing a contact center person's job, but helping them have better human-to-human interactions by somehow automating observation of the behaviors that they're delivering, either in training or live in production, tracking that training in real time and giving them immediate feedback. So I did a lot of studies around delayed feedback versus immediate feedback. And in call centers especially, sometimes they're not going to know that agent, let's say the example was somebody at I think it was Comcast, where they keyed in the wrong appointment information for some technician to show up at the house. Well, they didn't get that information until a couple of weeks later that happened, because the technicians as a separate contractor, and by the time they fill out their reports, then that gets to the call center, gets to the manager, gets to the agent. It's like, oh, okay, yep, I guess I screwed up. That doesn't help. So
no, that's a real ouch.
Yeah, so if you can give them immediate feedback, we learn from mistakes. So like a little kid touching the hot stove, they're like, well, not going to do that again. So if you get that feedback immediately, just like touching the hot stove, you're going to learn that much faster, and that knowledge transfer is going to happen much faster as well. So
and
that's where I see AI playing out.
Right. Okay. So AI does that, and that has the advantage of not just giving feedback to the individual, but maybe finding out something that's more systemic, like you were just talking about, and making sure that everybody is brought up to speed on it, and maybe the system has changed and the processes, et cetera. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that be very powerful. And if you actually do that, the ROI on whatever you did to get there is probably going to be pretty high too, right?
Right. Well, and you really have to understand the systems that you're working with. You have to understand how AI works. I was actually helped with the Chicago AI Days here about a month or so ago, and helping put together panelists and the speakers. And I was telling the gentleman running it, I said, well, we're forgetting one very important panel here. He says, well, who's that? I said, the bots. We need to have a panel of Siri and Alexa and Google Voice. And so I brought all these devices and asked volunteers from the audience to hold them. I held the microphone, and I asked each of the bots individually, the same question, because you can address them separately, and just to show the audience that we still have a ways to go. The bots are not going to take over the world, so you have to understand the limitations of what this technology can do as well, and understand natural language processing and all that. So you can't just plug in. It's not a plug and play activity. So you have to really understand the technology, understand what its limitations are, but also understand the power behind it. Because we even asked all of those bots, what's the definition of AI? Siri got it completely wrong. And she went into this long description about something else. Yeah. And then we pulled the audience for who they thought which bot, answered the questions more accurately, and actually Alexa won.
Alexa won.
So,
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So it was, understanding what it's capable of and understanding the limitations, but really kind of saying where we're going to get the biggest ROI based upon the operations and the behaviors and the kind of the feedback mechanisms, feedback loops that you're looking for.
Right. No, I can imagine. Poor Siri. When my wife, who went to a school that had a big agricultural program, and she heard us talking about AI, and she said, "Why are you talking about artificial insemination?" Got that wrong.
That's true. I did grow up on a farm.
Yeah, I think things have moved on since then. Yeah. So interesting. Okay, that's very clever. I love that idea that you did that. Are there any other? We're going to go to questions here in a second with Alan, but any other big training challenges that you'd like to share with us and that we should know about? Yeah,
I think the biggest one is time. what I see within the contact center space, especially, well, not only there, in general everywhere, is allowing that investment of time, letting somebody go off to a training course. Most contact centers compress that training window in 2 weeks. You can imagine everything they're trying to learn in that 2-week window. One of them that I was speaking with recently was 6 weeks, but they're saying, well, gosh, we get these people, we rush them through, they get 6 weeks of training, which we think is generous, but then after their first week on the floor, they decide, I don't like being a call center agent, and they quit. So we're trying to compress it down to maybe 4 weeks so that we're not spending that extra money for that 2 weeks of them being in training. And I said, well, is that really the right way to look at it? Maybe right. Maybe somehow expose them to what is reality earlier on in the training period, either through simulation or role play, so that, they're not taken off guard once they get into that production environment. But I would say really giving them realistic experiences, giving
right.
them hands-on experience, that to me is where people see, oh gosh, that's going to cost a lot of money. Well, it doesn't really have to cost a lot of money these days if you do it right and use the right tools. But just what's best practice? Who are our top agents? What are they doing out there? They're not really looking at who's doing it well to work and then reverse engineer the training program so that it addresses those behaviors and activities that, here, geez, somebody's successfully doing it here. Maybe we should just copy what they're doing.
Right. Yeah. No, I think the 6-week programs, one of the problems with that is that people have sort of limited capacity to remember stuff, particularly if they don't practice it. And even in the 6-week programs that have good role play, which is really key, I think.
Right.
Even in those cases, it's there are centers who are able to chunk things so that they're able to do a module, get people up to competency on 1 or 2 things, and then actually put them in a queue, which is for the easy questions. Right. And it does a couple of things. It gets them over that stage fright of the first time you're on the phone. It gets them into the sort of being mentored in a nesting phase where they get comfortable with the interaction with the supervisor or the agent advocate / mentor. And then they go back for some more training, and they are able to go into more queues and be programmed for more queues, and sort of build that way. That's ideal when that can be done. So, well, good. Well, we're getting to the point where we need to move to questions. But did you have anything else you wanted to say on that before we do?
No, we can move into the questions that were emailed in. Sure. Okay,
so over to Alan.
Yes, we have several questions coming in. The first one I got here is from Cody, and he's asking, are there some examples of someone who is using technology in the wrong way for training?
Oh, yeah. I've got a good one. So I won't say the company name, but I was answering an RFP for a company looking for a simulator for a contact center. And they said, but anything you have in VR or virtual reality, augmented reality, we'd like to see that too in your response. And I thought, oh, gosh, I wonder why they want that, because maybe they're wanting to show the agent how the customer's feeling, or maybe so they could be more empathetic, so maybe see how they're reacting in an AR augmented reality way. And so I set the meeting up with them and went through my little spiel, and they said, well, do you have any AR or VR? And I said, well, I mean, I can develop it. I've actually looked into that in the past, but can I ask how you're going to use it? They said, well, we want the person to be able to pick up the router as they're helping the customer, so they can look at the same, equipment that they're looking at and turn it around, look at all angles. And I said, wait a minute, this isn't going to be an actual router that's connected to that environment, right? No, it's just the same piece of equipment. I'm like, wouldn't a printed PDF have the same capabilities, if you're not changing the physical equipment at all, and you can't change the experience that the customer is still having on their other end of the phone? That seems like an over-engineered solution to me.
Yeah, no, good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So hopefully they made the appropriate change there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think with any kind of technology, you have to use it the right way. And one of the things to do is to talk to other people who are using it, and there's nothing. I mean, everybody loves going to industry events, right? And one of the reasons is you get to talk to other people, what they're doing, what mistakes they've made, what they like, what they don't like, and the things that they're doing. So making sure that you actually, talk to people and ask your vendor, your supplier, to give you other references. Very, very important. Very important.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, good. Thank you for that answer. Alan, do we have any others?
Yes, we got a couple more. The next one is from Robert, and the question is, a lot of call centers use role-playing to get agents up to speed. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm always a big believer in learning by doing, and I actually did a webinar a while back where I compared simulations versus role playing, and there's pros and cons to both. The problem that I had in a couple years back when I first got into voice-based technology, I created this interactive role-playing tool, because when you're doing role-playing, number one, you have to have 2 to 3 people at the same time, so that's pulling resources away. It becomes very subjective in the way that someone's assessing whether or not you did it well or not, and the person always being asked to be either the agent, always feels like they're in the hot seat, and that's not always the best way to conduct a learning experience. They're more worried about am I going to say the wrong word? I'm going to say the right thing, versus, being something that allows them to make mistakes without being judged. But the one benefit it does provide is that if you're the person playing the customer, you get to feel that sense of, you get to learn how to be empathetic because you're the customer. You're maybe having the frustrating experience on the other end of the phone. So I think in that way, that's good. Or if you're doing role playing in a way that maybe you're using a recorded conversation and then having people respond, how would you respond to this, and back and forth with an actual customer engagement, that is a good way to learn. But I think the traditional way that people do role playing, there's room for improvement there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things too that I've noticed is that with the role playing thing, we oftentimes are concerned about how the agent is going to feel in the hot seat there. But actually, the trainers and supervisors are oftentimes in the same place. They haven't been trained on how to do role playing well either. And so they're not really comfortable with it. And yet, they're not only they have to actually set it up and run it, and it has to be impressive, and it has to work, and all that sort of thing. And there's a certain amount of stress in that is also. So role-playing is really important. As you said, we need to sort of create a safe space for people to do the role-playing.
And it's usually done one time. It's a one-time event usually versus this week we're going to role play now. This is our role-playing slot. Or if they did it on a regular basis like that and it had that culture, I'd say go for it.
Well, and in terms of doing it on a regular basis, one of the things to keep in mind is, in particular for those situations where they have new products coming out, they have new issues coming down the pike, et cetera. One of the things is to have a team meeting and to say, hey, there's this problem with our product, and so we want you all to know about it. It's another thing to say, we've got this problem with the product, we've got this fix that's coming through, let's do a role play on it. Okay, so let's say that, I call in and blah, blah, blah. After the instruction has been done, let's actually see what it feels like to actually deal with the situation. And, that's, I think, something that should be ongoing, and not simply something that's reserved for initial training.
Right, I agree, 100%.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question here, Alan. Do you have one for us?
Yeah, let me get one out. We got one from Corey, and the question is, what recommendations do you have for how to design an effective training program?
Okay, well, this goes back kind of what I was saying earlier. Look to see someone that's your top performer. What are they doing? What nuances are they doing that maybe they didn't learn in their initial training that they've learned to use over time just based upon the systems that they're using, the resources that they have, and the types of customers they're interacting with. And, kind of, like I said, reverse engineer it from there and give those agents as much hands-on as you can, because, I'm deep into that simulation space, but any kind of interactivity, anything that's more active versus passive learning. I see a lot of passive learning design out there where it's an online course where it's just, page turning, and that's really not helpful. And so the way you want to break it down is, first of all, is the information is the learning I'm giving them, is it information-based or is it skills-based? And start breaking it down from there. And anything that's informational-based, put it into a document, put it into some reference, put it into SharePoint or wherever you've got, your knowledge management system, and teach them how to navigate it to get it to when they need it on demand. But anything that's actually skills-based where you have to transfer knowledge, make that as hands-on as possible. So any recorded calls that you can give them and have them react to them, any kind of simulation, there's software simulation tools out there, anything like that really gives them that hands-on experience to help make that knowledge transfer faster.
Okay, I love that idea. I think that's great. And Nancy, unfortunately, we're out of time now. But if you have any last words for our audience, then I would love to hear them. Otherwise, we'll proceed to wrap things up.
Well, just value the investment in training and think about the value you're providing today and see how you can improve upon that. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for being with us. It was great information. For any of our listeners who would like to reach out, Nancy can be reached at nancy@verbaltransactions.com. And this episode, as you know, will be recorded and will be posted on our website for your future listening pleasure. So thank you so much again. And with that, I'll hand things over to great. And I'll hand things over to Alan to wrap things up.
Yes, thanks again to Nancy and to Bruce for your insightful discussion on today's show. Be sure to join us next month for another great show or look at our huge selection of archive shows and topics at benchmarkportal.com. Then click on CallTalk, where you'll find over 9 seasons of this show. From all of us at Benchmark Portal, keep those headsets steady and your fingers ready. This is Alan Potcotter signing out. Have a great day.